Welcome to this presentation. It's about something called the view clips, and we have been working on that at our R&D in Linköping for quite some time now. And what's view clips? So what's view clips? View clips is a new system that replaces the old 2D viewport. So it's, as you can see here in the display, we have removed the 2D viewport icon and instead made an entire card consisting of 2D, 2D empty, companions, and all that good stuff. And this system is supposed to be both significantly faster, easier to customize, and easier for the user to use in the end. So in this presentation, we're going to go through an overview of the system, why it's useful, how it works, how we're supposed to use the system, how you as developers will migrate to the new system. Then I have a quick hands-on demo with how you create your custom companions and stuff. And then we also have some time for questions, probably. So the overview, why view clips are awesome. So view clips, they utilize a much faster graphics engine called the Red Engine, which is what we currently use in 2D and 3D view. And before, the pay-per-view used something called GDI. And as you can see in the speed comparison here, it will be much faster. So let's play that video now. So the viewport is on the left side, the old one, and the view clips are on the right. And we have a drawing with quite a lot of snappers, and all the snappers are very difficult to render. We go to paper space in both programs, and then we switch paper here. And as you can see, the red version is super fast, but the GDI is still loading, and it has to load for quite some time. And there, it's done. So as you can see, it was quite a big difference in speed. And also we noticed that using viewports in the past have been quite cumbersome to extend its functionality in case you want to add like some custom details for your specific papers or your specific viewports and stuff. It's been pretty difficult because you need to extend the viewport and add all kinds of new methods and override the old methods and stuff. So we try to make it much more modular now with something we call companions. We'll get into detail about that later, but it's basically a way to attach functionality to a viewport or view clip, sorry. And then we've added some new controls to the view clips, so it's much more easier to know what settings to change and how to pinpoint your source area, and what you look at, that is. And I'll show how that works. This is basically how view clips works. So we have three kinds of snappers. One is called the wormhole snapper, and that is the snapper that you see on the paper. So if I just show quick in the program here, this is the wormhole snapper. So it's what you see in the paper and what displays the content on the paper, basically. And then we also have something called a source snapper. And the source snapper decides what the wormhole snapper shows in its content. So for instance, if I go back to CET here and I place, let's say, a scarecrow, then we can see this is the source area. This is just a square representing what we see in the paper. So now when I include the scarecrow and go back to paper, you can see that the scarecrow and the entire rect is included here, although shrunk. And then we also have something called companions. And companions modifies the appearance of the wormhole snapper. And they can do this in two different ways. We'll get into detail about that later. But basically they can either edit the appearance of the snapper or the content it's showing. So I have a little example here. So if we're in 2D view, we can see the source rectangle here and the paper here. This is the wormhole. And as you can see, the wormhole reflects what the source contains. And then we also have something called companions. And this companion, for instance, is a scale companion. So it adds a scale display to the wormhole. So you don't need to add all custom stuff to the view clip directly, but instead you add a scale companion that itself shows or displays the scale to the wormhole. So that's how they work very quickly. And Also, we're going to go through how to insert new view clips. So this, I think it's easier if I show hands-on. And these are the things I'm going to show. So first, I went through it real quick before, but to insert a view clip, you basically use the 2D or 2D empty. And if you use the 2D, you first get this animation. And as you can see here, you have shape. You can use different kind of shapes now. Very cool. So for instance, rounded rectangles or ellipses or whatever you like. And then you have insert mode. We'll get into that in just a bit. And then here you can choose which space you want to look at. So for instance, if you want to look at alternative 1 or alternative 2, or if you have elevations views, you can select them here as well. And then you can select the scale here right off the bat. And then you can select, like, since I have a custom scale here selected, I can manually type in here exactly which scale I'd like. So I insert this into the paper by just double clicking like this. And then I get warped into something, into the 2D view, into the space that I wanted to look at. So now I can move around here and I can select precisely what kind of area I'd like. So if I want to have this in a mill, I can just click here and ta-da, here we have it. So as you can see, the scarecrow is perfectly in the center, and we have a source to look at here. But if we want to, for instance, make a paper template that everyone can use in your company, for instance, we can instead use the 2D empty button here. We get the same kind of settings here as previously, but if we insert this one, we get this. So we didn't warp to the edit mode, as we call it, to the space we're looking at. Instead, we got this kind of placeholder that says double click to insert the view clip. So what we have to do now is that we have to double click here. Then we get into this second stage of the animation, and we can use place a source here, for instance. So this functionality is very useful if you're, for instance, building templates. Let's say you're building a template with some, let's say we want this one to cover half of the paper, and then we want another one here, this, and then maybe we want a third one here. Why not? Now we could just save this paper and then include it in every drawing we like, and then they can just double click to insert here and place them accordingly. So it's quite handy if you're working in 2 stages, one for designing the paper and one for using it in your drawings. Yes, and then the third way of inserting a view clip is by using this tool here. This was previously copy viewport to pay per view, but now you can instead, since we don't have any viewports, you can use this to pinpoint your source. So then it pops up in a different view here, but it's also in the paper here, of course. So going this way from 2D to paper is more useful, I'd say, if you know exactly what you want to show, but you don't care as much about what scale it gets and stuff. If you're in the paper here, you're super specific where and how big it should be in the paper. So let's say I want this exactly like this. Then it's easier or more convenient to use this approach. And I talked about collapsed view clips. And then we also have the view clip quick properties. So if I insert one here, here we can decide what shape it's supposed to have, like this. Automatically updates when I change it. And then here I can select which alternative to look at, for instance, like this. So the alternative one doesn't have any scarecrow. Then here, the visibility works like it did in the viewport. You have view modes and you have filters. And now we don't have any content. So let's just change that here. And we can, for instance, use this, block this category or this, or yeah. Just as usual. And then we also have the edit view button here. And you can use either this one, like this, or you can double click to enter something called edit mode. And we'll get more into detail about that later. But it's basically how you control the source when you have inserted it already. And then we have something called resize here. And this defines how the stretching of the wormhole layer should work. So if you have shape here, we modify the shape by dragging this. But let's say you have been very careful and perfectly placed it circular like this, and you don't want to change the shape at all. Then you can either toggle this off, then it's impossible to change it. but maybe you want it to be just a little bit bigger. Then you can change the lock scale here, and then you get scale here as well. So now when I drag it, the aspect ratio remains the same, and the shape remains the same, but the content and its size gets bigger. So this is super useful if you want what you're looking at to remain the same, but you want to maybe increase it a bit on the paper because it's too small or whatever. And then of course you can set the scale if you want 1 to 100, or you want 1 to 2, or if you want to custom, you can just type it in here, like 1 to 3, like this. Super easy, super simple. Yeah, so that's how you use the quick properties. And then how do we control the source? We control it by using something called the edit mode. And you enter the edit mode by double clicking here or using the edit view here. Then you get in here, and here you have some settings too. For instance, here you can also change the shape, and it will go through and change the shape in the paper as well. And then you can resize either off if you don't want to mess around with the size, or you can use zoom here. And if you were here and you had the lock scale on or off, you can see that we have 2 or 3 options here. But once you're in here, it's impossible to change the shape of the source. You can't just make it like less, what do you call it, more rectangular, less quadratic, or yeah, you can't make it thinner or wider. You're kind of locked with what you use on the paper here, but you can change whether you can resize it or not here. And you can set the scale as usual and change the shape. And if you have, let's say we have 2 view clips here. Let's say I create one here that covers exactly the scarecrow like this. And we enter edit mode for this one. Then it's impossible to move the other view clips here. And this is to make sure, oops, bug, sorry. This is to make sure that you can't accidentally move anything else than what you wanted to edit. Because when we assume that when you enter edit mode from this view clip, you only want to edit this source. So if you want to change the other one, you have to enter edit mode through that one. And you can't move any snappers around or accidentally malplace something. When you're in here, the source you wanted to change is the only thing that you can alter. And then you get back, of course, using this paper icon here, or you can just press Ctrl-Z to undo, or you can press Ctrl-W. Any questions on that or anything previously? So now you know how to enter edit mode, exit edit mode, and changing the source area. So what about the companions that I talked about? As I said, they are snappers that connect to the wormhole and alters the appearance. So how do we apply one? We apply one by using one of these buttons here. So for instance, let's say we want to add that scale from the example. Then we just press this one and the animation starts. So here you have an animation that can apply companions like this. So when the arrow you see here jumps to the view clip like this and becomes green, then you know it can apply it to that view clip. So if I click here, we see that it gets scale down here. But as you can see now, the arrow doesn't snap to this one anymore. And that is because you can only have one instance of each companion. So you can't have 2 scale companions. You probably don't want that anyway. But what if you want to remove the companion? Then you just press the remove property here, either like this or using space. And then this becomes red instead. And this, of course, tells you that it will remove the scale companion. So then you just remove it by clicking like this. So it's very easy to add or remove companions. So let's say we add a scale companion. Now, as you can see up here in the settings, we have something called Configure. And here you can select whether you want to change the settings of the actual view clip or if you want to change the settings of the scale. So if we press the scale here, we get the scale settings. And for this particular companion, we only have a frame settings. And this indicates whether the scale should have a frame around it or not. So this makes it very easy to keep track of what setting belongs to what kind of companion. So let's say we add a frame here as well. Now it gets a frame like this. And now we can configure the frame instead. And we can choose here what kind of frame, like maybe we want a dashed one and the super wide, and maybe let's make it all green. Now you know, since you're in the frame settings here, you know that what you're editing is basically the frame settings. So it doesn't have anything to do with the scale one. So as you can see, this modifies the behavior or the appearance of the view clips. And you can use independent settings on each view clip like this. And this makes it very modular and easy to add custom behavior without having to have a mess with a lot of settings on one single big viewport like it was before. Now it's very easy because you can only create one singular easy companion and just apply it or remove it. And then once it applies, it gets its own settings like this. So it's much more like abstracted out of the view clip right now. I think it's super neat at least. Yeah, so that's a quick overview of how companions work. So about migration. As you all know, I've told you many times that the viewports will be replaced by view clips this time around. So we have implemented an automatic conversion like this. So all 2D viewports will be replaced with view clips automatically. And this includes like when you load drawings, when you load favorites, when you load papers. So anytime you load one of the viewports, it will automatically turn itself into a view clip. So just for the demo, I introduced a demo viewport button here. So let's say I add a viewport like this, and then I save it, and then I load it. And then as you can see here, it turns into a view clip because now we have all these cool companions on it, and we have a shape setting here, and we have view it looks at and all that stuff. So as soon as you load a drawing with the viewport, it will turn into a view clip now from now on. So it doesn't look identical to the viewport anymore. The PDF diffs, if you have any tests, including viewports, they will change because it will automatically convert them into view clips now, and they look a bit different. So maybe I can just show if I load it. This one is automatically converted, so it's a view clip, and then I use a viewport over here. I lock it like this. But as you can see, the text on the scale, for instance, here is a bit bigger in the view clip. Same with the special companion that we're about to build. More on that later. But yeah, so if you have any PDF diffs, of course, this will turn into a test reject or test error because the scale doesn't look the same anymore and it thinks it's a bug, but it's actually a feature. You have to update those PDF references. And okay, so how do you migrate your custom viewports then? Say you have added some custom functionality to your special viewport that is super neat. There are two different options for you to do so. One is to create your own separate companions for the different things you have in your viewport. And the upsides with this is that you have complete access to the wormhole and the source snappers. And it's possible to add your custom graphics to present the added stuff to the user very easily. But if you only have, like, let's say your viewport changes the view mode in some kind of way, and that already exists in the view clip, then it's kind of an overkill to use a companion because you can just use what's called copy configuration. And copy configuration is super easy to change, like standard settings that all view clips or viewport used to have, but it makes it a bit harder but possible to control added settings afterwards. So let's say you have said, I want to display how much the content in the drawing costs, let's say. Then if you would use copy configuration, sure, you could copy over the data, but it would be very hard for you to display that data to the user in the end. So then I would recommend using a companion instead, because it has a means to display its custom graphics onto the view clip. So rule of thumb, if we change default stuff, then you should use copy configuration. But if we migrate new stuff or want to display something specific, then you should use a companion. So let's create a companion. I've already shown you what I aim to get. So let's say we have this demo viewport that I made that also, in addition, shows which space we're looking at. So we're looking at alternative 2 here, and then maybe we're looking at alternative 1 now, for instance, like this. I know something similar exists in the viewport and it displays it here somehow, but let's just say that you made this just for an example. Then we could try to use copy settings for it. So let's try that. If we now insert it like this, we lock it, we see that it works, and then we save and load it, we see that this doesn't have a companion, of course, because we haven't made a companion. We've tried to use the copy configuration here. So we've migrated over the data, like you can see here, in the prop data. We have gotten the show space to be true here, but nothing is displayed. And that's pretty obvious, actually, because we don't have any means to display it. We don't have a companion, or we haven't overridden ViewClip to display this kind of stuff. And we shouldn't override ViewClip. We should create a companion for it because we want to display additional stuff. We don't want to mess around with how the ViewClip works. So just to show how I did the copy configuration, the viewport snapper now has a method called copy configuration. And this will automatically be invoked when you load a drawing with the viewport. So if you in your special viewport, just override this function called super, of course, to get the default settings. And then you can set your own settings like this. Then you copy over your custom settings very easily. But since this doesn't work the way we want to use the companion strategy instead to display custom stuff. That means we need another method because this only copies configuration, right? So now we want to use the create companions from viewport method instead. And this is a method that exists in viewport 2D, and it requires the wormhole snapper, and it requires a list of companions that will be attached to that wormhole. So just here we check if we're showing space in the viewport, which we did. So if this checkbox is marked, then when we save it, then when we load it, we're gonna add a companion to our existing view clip, which is based on this viewport that has a demo companion. So that's pretty straightforward and easy, but the bit of a implementation part is that you actually have to implement the companion for this. You have to create a demo companion, or that's what I did. You have to create your own custom companion, which extends the XClip wormhole companion snapper class. And this snapper has some required methods called label and companion key. And key is basically an identifier for your class. It's what the ViewClip maps this class to, or calls this class basically. And then you also have a label, and the label is what will be displayed as a label. It's here, I think. So if I take this now, I lock it, show space is on, and I save it and I load it. We add a demo viewport like this. We make sure that it's ticked in. We lock. Then we save and we load. And there it is. Yes. The label is what will be shown here. So here you can see it says demo companion. And this is the label parameter or the function here. And then I chose to just send the text size and line type over here, which is migrated from the viewport now. So it remembers what text size it had and what line type it used. Then we have this one, which is an empty constructor, and that one is actually required as well, since when you're using the animation, if you have a button like this one needs to have a default constructor. Otherwise, it won't show up in this list. So it's kind of important. But you can create custom constructors as well, of course, as I did. And then when you use this kind of animation like this, once you press here, it will actually place a snapper into the space and then connect the snapper to the associated view clip. So this code here, as you can see here, it says connected to wormhole. And then it says which wormhole it is connected to. So here you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with a wormhole, like check what it's looking at and calculate a price, or I don't know, you can do all kinds of stuff. You have complete control here, at least. But don't forget to invoke super. That's super important. And then I had some props for the text size here, and then some stuff about what it should do when you change the text size, etc. And then a build 2D. This is the one that generates the graph. And this one you should override, but that's nothing new. And then if you want to have a button like this, you can either provide your own cool icon here, and then you can use that by overriding this method. So now you've stolen the scale companion icon. So if I refresh here now, I will have the scale icon here instead. But if I don't use this method, it will fall back to the default icon. This. So now it has the default one. But if you have a cool icon and want to use it, go for it and just override this method. Then there are some other methods that's pretty important. If you want your companion to appear in this list, you need to somewhere call register xclip wormhole companion class. This is what makes the companion actually get attached to the list here. So, and this is actually in the end what requires a default constructor, because it will try to create the companion, and if it works, it adds it to the list. So this one is nice if you want to, and it will always appear in here. It gets like where the view clips are supposed to go. You automatically get your companions as well, so you know where to find them. Let's say you want to create a custom button for some reason that starts this animation, but once it's inserted, it does some other stuff to the view clip. Let's say you always want to add this alternative companion here. And have a custom button for it, like insert view clip with space ID showing. Then you can override this method called xclip wormhole snapper limb. And to this you include which parents, which package you're from, which key it should have, if it should have hint, and also something called a configure callback. And this configure callback is a function that requires a wormhole snapper. And for an example, I've made a pretty one here. And this one is called as soon as the wormhole gets placed in the paper. So then you get complete control to alter the behavior or the settings of the wormhole here. So note that this is different from the create companions from viewport, because in the create companions from viewport, this one, we're converting a viewport to a view clip. But in this method down here, we're trying to create a new view clip from nothing, basically from an animation. So this is when you have a completely new view clip and had nothing before. And create companions up here. Here is to create a companion or create new companions based on the viewport you previously had. So it's a subtle different, but an important one. Yeah, I think that's about it. I will include this code file along with the presentation. So if you want to look at it, you can just have a go. Yeah. But other than that, thanks for your attention.